Hello everyone. This is the fifth part of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Chapter 17, Political Landscape of Magical Britain. Quinn didn't sleep well at night after buying the wand. Even after his usual routine of exhausting his magic that leaves him dead tired at night, he couldn't sleep. Knowing that there was a wand in his cupboard kept him up all night. Quinn spent the whole night staring at the cupboard or trying to look away from the cupboard. There were times when Quinn sat up on his bed and was tempted to open up the cupboard and take out the wand and hold it one more time. The temptation of once more feeling the heightened focus gripped Quinn all night, but in the end, Quinn didn't open the cupboard and didn't see the wand. He could only get a brief rest after the sun came up. The next day, Quinn had to pretend to be all giddy and joyous for finally getting his wand. In the morning, Quinn, before exiting his room, wore his wand holster with the fake wand replica in it. He had to play the part of the cheerful kid who got his wand. So he did. Quinn pranced around the house, showing off his fake wand to all the people and swinging it, pretending to cast spells with whoosh-whoosh noises. To distract himself, he threw himself into all his usual activities. He kept himself busy. That day, he played the piano and his second instrument, the violin. He practiced ballroom dancing, brewed potions and tended to the herb garden. Researched legitimacy to create an alternative model of defenses to practice against. And practiced other fields of magic. Anything to keep himself from having free time. It wasn't till the evening when Quinn was called into his grandfather's study. When he entered George's study, Quinn asked, "Why have you called for me, grandfather?" George gestured to Quinn to take a seat before speaking. "We would be discussing the political landscape of Britain and the notable families inside Britain." Quinn's eyes widened as he had forgotten all about it. The wand incident had taken all his attention, and the realization that this world may be being an alternate universe or a parallel universe had completely slipped his mind. Ah, yes. I had completely forgotten about that. What was the name I saw in the newspaper? Potters, was it? Said Quinn, slowly shifting his attention from the wand incident to this topic. George nodded and started, "Yes, the Potters, but we will come to them later. First, let's talk about the creation of Magical Britain." When Quinn nodded, George continued, "The Ministry of Magic is the main governing body of the magical community of Great Britain and Ireland, with the intention of preservation of magical law. The ministry also connects the British non-magical government to the magical world." Quinn nodded as he already knew that. But, before Ministry of Magic, there was another governing body. The name was the Wizards' Council. Upon establishing the International Statute of Magical Secrecy in 1692, the British magical community needed a more highly structured, organized, and complex government structure to support and regulate the community in hiding. Thus, in 1707, the Wizards' Council disbanded to be replaced by the Ministry of Magic. George then explained something about the Wizards' Council. "You see, the same group of people ran Wizards' Council for centuries, and the positions on the Wizards' Council were hereditary. So, they dubbed those families as the noble and most ancient houses." Quinn nodded with interest. He hadn't known the reason behind the creation of the noble and most ancient house. Now, when the Ministry of Magic was founded, the ministry dubbed plenty more influential families as noble houses, explained George. Now, you might wonder what this has to do with anything. The thing is that many the noble and most ancient houses and noble houses hold positions in Wizengamot. The Wizengamot was Magical Britain's High Court of Law and Parliament and predated the Ministry of Magic itself, dating back to the days of the medieval Wizards' Council, and currently had a lot of power in the governing of Magical Britain. Please note that not all the noble and most ancient houses and noble houses hold positions in Wizengamot, but all the families that occupy seats hold the title of the noble and most ancient houses or noble houses. George opened a book and showed him a crest. "This is the crest of the Weasley family, and they are a noble house, but they don't hold a seat in Wizengamot." He flipped a page and showed another crest. "Burke is a noble and most ancient house, and they don't hold a seat in Wizengamot." He closed the book and continued, "The point is that families can hold power in the Wizengamot, and they are very active in politics. Another noticeable point is that the title of noble and most ancient house can't be revoked, but the title of the noble house can be revoked." George leaned back into his chair and stated, "Our family could have gained a title of noble family if desired, then he snorted, "But we don't really need it. It is frighteningly easy to get things done in the British Ministry of Magic if you have money, which we have in plenty." George once again flipped some pages and showed him another crest. "Look at Malfoy's, they have the minister in his pockets and spend plenty of money to remain in political power. In the past, they bought themselves the title of the noble family. Neither I, nor my predecessors saw the merit in getting a seat in the Wizengamot. So we never tried to gain the title of a noble family. If you or Leah want to gain the title, then we can just shed some money, and we would have the title, but I would advise against it." He then opened another page of the book in front of him and showed him a tally. "Every decision in the Wizengamot is decided by voting. You need a clear majority to pass a bill. Heads of titled families have 1 vote each in the Wizengamot. The minister holds the highest of 5 votes. Every head of a department in the ministry has 2 votes. Chief Warlock of Wizengamot has 3 votes. Finally, the headmaster of Hogwarts holds 1 vote." George placed a blank sheet of paper on the table, drew a circle on it and then divided it into 3 parts. With a swing of his wands, one part turned black, the other part turned grey, and the third part remained blank. "I divide the current political landscape into 3 factions, dark, grey, and light. The dark faction is pureblood supremacists and tries to keep the power within the pureblood community. The light faction tries to keep the power away from the dark faction and their pureblood propaganda. They have a liberal mindset that supports half-bloods and muggleborns. The grey faction acts with the motive of self-interest, they would support anyone if they are benefiting. But they also keep the other 2 factions at bay. The grey faction rejects any outlandish, extremist ideas from either party. This is assuring because I hear some really ridiculous ideas presented at the Wizengamot." Quinn stayed silent and just took in the information provided by George. "Now, before we dive into the leaders of the factions, I would like to talk to you about the Wizarding War from 1970 to 1981. In that war, a Dark Lord rallied the pureblood supremacists and declared a war against the Muggles and Muggleborn. He took advantage of one of the Wizarding world's greatest weaknesses, the beings and creatures they had outcast. The Dark Lord recruited the giants, who had long ago been driven by magical humans into the mountains, and werewolves, who were persecuted by most magic kind." George explained in detail about the war. Then George looked at Quinn and said, "People even feared saying the name of the Dark Lord, and called you-know-who or the one who must not be named. Do you know why people feared saying his name?" Quinn shook his head, even though he knew the reason behind the hyphenated alternatives. The taboo is a powerful spell which designated a word as a key to revealing the speaker's location. They used this spell during the war. During the said war, saying the Dark Lord's name was made taboo. George solemnly continued, "I had already left Britain with your parents and newly born sister, so we were never near the war, but even then, we would hear stories of people getting captured by the Dark Lord's Death Eaters." George wrote the words on the paper and recited the name on the sheet. The name of the Dark Lord was Voldemort. Quinn knew the name was an anagram from Voldemort's real name, Tom Marvolo Riddle. Then on the 31st of October 1981, Halloween, the Dark Lord died at Godric's Hollow. He died at the hands of a 1-year-old babe. The name of that babe was Harry Potter, popularly known as the boy who lived. But not before killing off Harry Potter's grandparents, Fleamorn and Euphemia Potter. George sighed once before continuing. "I wouldn't call Fleamorn and Euphemia friends, but they were easy to do business with. I lost potential business that day. Their son, James Potter, isn't one bit interested in business." Quinn nodded. It was surprising that his grandfather had contact with the Potters. But when taking in the fact that his grandfather had his hands in every possible business opportunity in Britain, it made sense that he knew many people. Potters were, as George said, business opportunities. From that day onwards, Potter became extremely famous, and Harry Potter became the savior of magical Britain. That fame has lasted till this day, as the Potters used that fame to enter politics and rallied all the Light families under the Light faction. Currently, the Light faction is led by Albus Dumbledore. You must know this name, correct? Quinn affirmed, Albus Dumbledore, the headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. He also holds seats in Wizengamot as Chief Warlock, head of the noble House of Dumbledore, and the headmaster of Hogwarts. He paused for a second before continuing, "Doesn't that make his vote count equal to the minister's 5 votes?" George chuckled, "Yes, it does. Albus Dumbledore works hard to keep all those positions. Along with his 5 votes, the entire Light faction support, and all their votes. Potters follow him, and so does the rest of the Light faction. We can say Albus Dumbledore is the Light faction." Quinn thought about something he wanted to ask. "Do we have some business in Hogwarts?" George's eyes sparkled and enthusiastically answered, "Yes, we do. We own Scrivenshaft's quill shop in Hogsmeade, so all the school stationery for all Hogwarts students and professors is supplied by us. Plus, we also cater a portion of the school's potion ingredient and food supplies." Quinn nodded and curiously asked, "Why do Hogwarts still use quills and parchment instead of pen and paper?" "I truly do not know, but they don't want to change, so we supply what they demand," George spoke while shrugging. "I guess they are trying to keep up an old tradition alive, or maybe they don't want to adopt non-magical advancement." George brought back the conversation to the track and spoke, "Now, let's talk about the Dark faction." "The Dark faction is the remnants of the Dark Lord's Death Eaters," George scoffed. "After the war, most of them pleaded the case of being under the influence of Imperious curse, and with a lot of bribery, Wizengamot acquitted them with heavy fines that went into ministry coffers. During the war, the Dark Lord led the Dark faction, but before the war, the dominant force was the noble and most ancient House of Black. They were in power since Wizards' Council's time. But, in the war, most of the Black family either died or imprisoned. Only 2 people of Black family are still in Black House, Arcturus Black, A.N. below, and Sirius Black. Arcturus Black is extremely weak, and no one has seen him since the war. I saw him after we returned from our tour. We talked some business. Sirius Black spends his time at the Aura office or with the Potters among the Light faction. That lad is close friends with James Potter, plus Sirius Black is also disowned by the Black family. There are some more Blacks, but they are married or disowned." Quinn wasn't surprised when he heard Sirius Black was out and not in Azkaban, because if the Potters were alive, they would have spoken for Sirius at his hearing. That probably meant that Peter Pettigrew was either in Azkaban or maybe even dead. George sneered before flipping some pages and showed Quinn another crest. "Now, Malfoys lead the Dark faction. They were the main sponsors of the Dark Lord after the Blacks, and with so much money funneled into the corrupt ministry, the Malfoys got out scot-free. Now, they are in power because a lot of Dark families had to pay a lot for getting out of Azkaban, and Malfoys were the best prepared for it, so they are the strongest among the Dark faction in the post-war times. Malfoys in power was not surprising as the power of money was very potent in magical Britain. Malfoys had the minister in his pocket. And, from listening to George, the West family also had a considerable amount of money in the ministry. Now, the last faction is the Grey faction, with the noble and most ancient House of Greengrass leading them. Jacob Greengrass is a cunning man. He is a smart man and an excellent leader. After the war, he held the Grey faction together without any internal turmoil, and just like me, he saw the profit after the war subsided. I was a little upset when he tried to compete with me for resources, post-war. He and Lucius Malfoy are the 2 people who can rival my business in Britain." George laughed and spoke as if looking down on the 2 heads of houses. "But, that only means that they earn as much as our business in Britain. They wouldn't even touch the soles of my feet if I took into account our business from overseas." Quinn held back a hell yeah and just smiled as he listened to his grandfather boasting about his earnings and accomplishment as he compared himself to 2 men who would be younger than Quinn's father if he was still alive. George closed the book of crests, and he was back to his usual stoic self, and with a caution staining his voice and words, he warned, "Beware of Albus Dumbledore. Anytime I have met the man, he has tried to get me to join his cause. The man had tried to make me sponsor his vigilante group before I left the country, and when I returned, he once again tried to get his hands in my wallet by trying to have me sponsor the Light faction. Albus Dumbledore is too manipulative, and even though I am no stranger to manipulation, I just don't like it when it is done against me. Your future headmaster holds too much power, which might haven't been bad, if he was putting it to good use, and even if his reputation is positive and people think that he is the next big thing since Merlin, that man has been through 2 wars and was at the forefront in both of them. If I have learned anything from my father, then it is that war changes people. Think what 2 wars could do to a person." Quinn solemnly nodded as even without his warning, Quinn was going to avoid Albus Dumbledore. From what Quinn had read in the books, the man was treated like a person who could do no wrong and had the following of a cult leader. Quinn didn't want to approach the headmaster even if he offered to teach him alchemy, as Quinn was 100% sure that it would come with a catch. After all, Albus Dumbledore once was romantically involved with Gellert Grindelwald. Quinn was sure some manipulative tendencies were rubbed onto Dumbledore from Grindelwald. Or was it the other way around? For the rest of the month, Quinn learned from George about the ins and outs of the political landscape of magical Britain. Except for Albus Dumbledore, George didn't warn Quinn to stay away from anyone. As long as Quinn understood that blood supremacy was false and stupid, it was okay to build connections with children from Death Eater, dark faction families. George said that Quinn could make friends with anyone who wasn't after money. Quinn spent his remaining time before Hogwarts with his family and practicing magic. He wasn't comfortable with free time as he ended up thinking of the wand in his cupboard, and Quinn made sure to only spend time in his room for sleeping and when Quinn wanted to browse books from his bookshelves, but other than that, he spent time away from his wand. On the 1st of September 1990, it was time for Quinn to leave home to start his journey of learning magic at Hogwarts. Chapter 18, Platform 9 3/4, Hogwarts Express, and the Castle. Quinn smiled as he looked around the room he was standing in. Quinn was experiencing pure joy. It was for the first time since buying the wand that he had felt this level of delight. He was currently standing in a room that was filled with bookshelves. They were empty bookshelves. Not a single book could be found in the bookshelves around Quinn. Quinn walked to a staircase and climbed up to another floor with more empty bookshelves. Quinn had a smile on his face, and his hands behind his back strolled among the rows of bookshelves. He reached a part on the second level where there was an opening in the floor. The opening had wooden railings surrounding it. From that opening, Quinn could see down to the first floor. Just below the opening was a huge, heavy wood table for studying in the library. Quinn leaned against the railing as he exhaled out a sigh of happiness. He was currently standing in a 2-floor library, a library which was inside a suitcase. A suitcase that was magically expanded. Where did Quinn get it? It was a gift from Leah. She had commissioned a magically expanded suitcase from a famous suitcase maker in America. It reminded Quinn of Newt Scamander's suitcase. After exploring the whole suitcase, he found that it housed a huge 2-story library, a potion room with multiple workbenches and ingredient cabinets. It had a large walk-in closet for all his clothes. He also saw a fully furnished bedroom, if he wanted to sleep in the suitcase. And so many large empty rooms for Quinn to customize later. The suitcase didn't have the option to support growing vegetation like Newt Scamander's, but Quinn was content with that as he wasn't planning to store different beasts inside it or grow potion ingredients inside. He had been quite happy to know that he could carry all his books from around the world with him. The ministry highly regulated this kind of expansion charm, but George had managed to get approval for the suitcase. And even if someone wanted to check his suitcase, it had a feature that it would hide all the rooms except the few designated rooms. Quinn was grateful for this feature as he knew in the future there would be quite a few books the ministry would classify as dark in his collection after he copied the books from the restricted section of Hogwarts and the books he could find in the Room of Requirements. He didn't want his precious source of knowledge to be confiscated. He was also grateful Leah hadn't provided him more than the bare minimum. Quinn was going to develop this suitcase on his own and turn it into his own place. He was sure it would give a substantial amount of satisfaction when he would fill every room in this suitcase for a specific purpose. Quinn saw the development of the suitcase as a long-term project. Quinn then transferred all his books to the library, stored all of his new Hogwarts clothes and other clothes in the closet, and put all the other things he would need in Hogwarts into the suitcases. One example was reams upon reams of paper for his own note-taking. Quinn found parchment paper to be a little thick for his taste, and if not charmed, would shrink and expand with heat and humidity. And finally, Quinn placed a cuboidal block of wood in the center of an empty room in the suitcase. The block of wood held Quinn's wand. Quinn had encased his wand in the block of wood. It wasn't a box or container, it was just a block of wood with Quinn's wand in the middle of it. He had transmuted the wood to surround his wand and shaped it into a cuboid, and just for safety measure, he had etched the words, "Do not touch," on the block of wood. He wasn't ever going to let someone close to the wand container. But in the unlikely event someone got close to it, he etched the words so that they wouldn't touch it. Plus, he would ward and enchant both the block of wooden room when he got enough skills to pull it off. Before exiting the suitcase, Quinn locked the door and never looked back. Scene break. On the 1st of September 1990, Quinn, Leah, and George reached platform 9 3/4. It was fun when Quinn ran into the wall barrier and passed right through it to enter platform 9 3/4. There was an apparition point inside the platform, but Quinn wanted to go through the wall, so they entered the platform from the non-magical, muggle, side. Quinn didn't attract any attention as he only had a suitcase with him, and that too was shrunken down by Leah to look like a briefcase. Unlike many other students, he didn't have to carry pet cages, cauldrons, and other big things outside of the suitcase. Plus, all three members were wearing appropriate clothing, so there wasn't a problem on their part, and ministry employees were stationed around the train station to fire memory charms to alter memories of the people who noticed the weird presence of owls in cages on carts. The sight of the inside of the platform 9 3/4 was just as the books had described. The same Scarlet steam engine train, with Hogwarts students and their guardians on the platform. When he looked up, he saw the overhead sign that read Hogwarts Express, 11 o'clock. Smoke from the engine drifted over the heads of the chattering crowd, while cats of every color wound here and there between their legs. Owls hooted to one another in a disgruntled sort of way over the babble and the scraping of heavy trunks. As Quinn and his family had arrived early, and only a few carriages were filled, and he could see students hanging out of the window to talk to their families. Quinn asked Leah to undo the shrinking charm by using the counter charm, engorgement charm. And then turned to both of his family members and said, "I guess I will see you at Christmas." George knelt on one knee and hugged Quinn. "If you have any problem, just owl me, and I will be there to help you. Don't hesitate to ask for help." With one last squeeze, George released Quinn and stood up. Quinn faced Leah, and she too hugged Quinn and spoke, "Don't follow strangers, ask for help if you have any problem, don't feel pressured to do anything you don't want to, and don't do dangerous stuff. Study hard, but don't forget to have fun. Finally, write me a letter every day." Quinn laughed while hugging her back. "I can do one letter a week." Leah also chuckled and murmured, "You better." Quinn also hugged them once from his side and spoke, "Now, don't keep standing here. I don't want to keep waving goodbye to you till the train leaves, so leave immediately." Leah chuckled and ruffled Quinn's hair a little too roughly, which elicited a swat on her hand from Quinn, who immediately fixed his hair. Quinn lifted up his suitcase and then boarded the train. The moment he was inside the train and out of Leah and George's sight, he casted a feather-like charm on the suitcase and wove through the crowd until he found an empty compartment in the middle of the train. Quinn entered the compartment and levitated the suitcase onto the overhead luggage rack. Quinn thought of locking the compartment but decided against it. Quinn sat down next to the window and gazed outside, watching multitudes of students and parents. He saw a huge red-haired family stumbling onto the platform, hurrying to the platform as the Hogwarts Express was about to depart. He recognized the Weasley family, the two parents, Arthur and Molly, one mid-teen boy, who Quinn guessed was Charles, a pair of twins, Fred and George, another tween boy, Ron, and a little girl, Ginny. Quinn heard a knock on his door, and when he turned to look, there was a girl, same age as him, standing at the door. She opened the door and asked, "Hey, can I sit here? The rest of the compartments are either filled or people who are saving seats for friends. I can't find a seat." Quinn nodded and stood up to help the girl with her luggage. "Thank you, my name is Katie Bell," said the girl. It inwardly surprised Quinn for a split second before he introduced himself. "You are welcome. My name is Quinn West. First year?" He also put out a hand for a handshake. Katie Bell shook Quinn's hand and replied, "Yes, what about you?" Quinn nodded and spoke while returning to his seat, "I am a first year as well. Please take a seat." Katie took the seat opposite Quinn, next to the window. "So, are you excited for Hogwarts?" Quinn smiled and replied, "Indeed, I am. It would be fun to live in the castle. I read that the grand staircase in Hogwarts is ever-changing. An entire flight of stairs that was charmed to move and change paths." Katie was amazed, and with plenty of excitement accompanied by slight fear in her voice, she asked, "Really? That is mad, but what happens if someone falls from it?" Quinn put a hand on his chin before pondering out loud. I am not sure, but I have heard that the steps of the grand staircase can sink to trap people. Maybe the staircase traps people who are about to fall, or maybe the professors have set some measures. Quinn smiled before saying, Hogwarts is proud to say that they have 0 stairs-related deaths. Katie giggled at the joke. What about you, Ms. Bell? What are you most excited about? Quinn asked as he set up an elbow on the table in between them. Katie's eyes sparkled as she babbled, Quidditch. I love Quidditch. I want to join a Quidditch team. She had a dreamy look on her face as she talked on and on about Quidditch. Though Katie did stop after a while when she realized she had been speaking without stopping. Sorry about that. I got too excited. Katie blushed in embarrassment as she apologized. Don't mind it. So you said you want to join a team. Which house's team do you want to join? Asked Quinn as he tried to ease her embarrassment. My mother was from Gryffindor, and my father was a Hufflepuff, so I am fine with either of the two. What about you? Quinn shrugged as he talked. I am cool with either of the 4 houses. My parents didn't attend Hogwarts, but my grandfather did, and he was in Slytherin. But he said that all houses are good, so I will be good with any of the 4. Katie nodded and continued to talk with him. It didn't surprise Quinn that Katie didn't show any dislike when Quinn mentioned that his grandfather was from Slytherin. Not all children were raised up like Weasleys and grew up with prejudice against Slytherin part of their life. An hour into the ride, the trolley lady came knocking on the door and asked, Anything off the cart, dears? Quinn hopped off from his seat and picked a chocolate bar from the trolley. He turned to Katie, Do you want something? Katie gazed at the trolley and said, 2 cauldron cakes, please. Quinn nodded and paid for a chocolate bar and 2 cauldron cakes, and before the trolley lady left, he asked, When would the buffet cart open? The trolley lady smiled and informed, It will be open from 1:30 and would remain open for 2 hours, dear. Thank you, Quinn thanked before closing the door and walking back to his seat and placed Katie's cauldron cakes on the table. Katie handed Quinn the money for the cauldron cakes and asked, What is the buffet car? Quinn placed the chocolate bar aside and explained, The train ride is long, so the students must get hungry, and just sweets won't help, so there is a car on the train where you can buy lunch. It is actually written on the backside of the ticket. It is? Katie said as she fished out her Hogwarts Express ticket and looked at the backside. Oh, there it is. You are correct. Hogwarts Express provides lunch for students on the buffet car of the train. Why is the print so small? After having lunch, Quinn brought out one of Alan's books on occlumency from his suitcase when Katie was out of their compartment and started reading it. Quinn started reading, and sometime later, he heard the door open up and Katie standing at the door. She looked at Quinn but didn't enter. What is it, Ms. Bell? Asked Quinn. Hey, I made a friend and was thinking if she could join us, said Katie. Quinn saw no problem with it, so he nodded, but he was impressed by Katie's ability to make friends. Even when they visited the buffet car, she started talking with a group of people she had just met. A minute entered later, Katie entered the compartment with another girl. Once again, Quinn helped with the luggage and got a thank you in return. Hello, my name is Cho Chang. Nice to meet you, introduced the new girl. For the second time today, Quinn felt surprise hearing the name and thought, what are the chances to meet 2 named characters before even entering Hogwarts? Quinn offered his hand for a handshake while introducing himself. It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Chang. My name is Quinn West, first year. Cho shook Quinn's hand and added, Me too. Referring to her status as a first-year student. The 3 students sat down and talked for a while before Quinn went back to his book, while Katie and Cho continued to talk to each other. After a couple of hours, Quinn looked at the time in his pocket watch and turned to the 2 girls, Hey, the train will be reaching Hogwarts soon. We should change into our uniforms. Both girls nodded, and they decided that one by one they would change in their compartment, while the other 2 would wait outside and guard the compartment. All 3 of them changed into their uniforms, and now they truly looked like first-year students. Unlike all older students, the first-year students' robes, pre-sorting didn't have house colors and crests. Their neckties and other clothing also lacked house colors. Just before reaching Hogwarts, a voice echoed through the train, We will be reaching Hogwarts in 5 minutes. Please leave your luggage on the train, it will be taken to the school separately. Quinn's heart started beating faster, and when he looked around, he saw both Katie and Cho were looking nervous as they joined the crowd thronging the corridor. The train slowed right down and finally stopped. People pushed their way toward the door and out onto a tiny, dark platform. Quinn shivered in the chilly night air but slowly felt himself warm up because of the charm spelled into each thread of his clothes. Then a lamp came bobbing over the students' heads, and Quinn heard a booming voice. First years. First years over here. Quinn saw a towering person, who he could only identify as the half-giant, Rubeus Hagrid, Hogwarts keeper of keys and grounds. Come on, follow me, any more first years? Mind your step, now. First years follow me, ordered Hagrid in his booming voice. After a couple of minutes of following Hagrid, they finally saw the infamous Hogwarts castle. The sight of the castle took Quinn's breath away. He had seen many sights during his travel, and he could confidently say that the illuminated Hogwarts castle was one of the most mesmerizing sights he had seen. Even nature seemed to be helping the castle as a few moments later, the moon emerged from the clouds and bathed the castle with moonlight. No more than 4 to a boat. Hagrid called, pointing to a fleet of little boats sitting in the water by the shore. Quinn got on a boat and helped both Katie and Cho get on the boat. A fourth person didn't enter their boat. Everyone in, shouted Hagrid, who had a boat to himself. Right then, forward. And the fleet of little boats moved off all at once, gliding across the lake which was as smooth as glass. Everyone was silent, staring up at the great castle overhead. It towered over them as they sailed nearer and nearer to the cliff on which it stood. Heads down, yelled Hagrid as the first boats reached the cliff. They all bent their heads, and the little boats carried them through a curtain of ivy that hid a wide opening in the cliff face. They were carried along a dark tunnel, which seemed to be taking them right underneath the castle until they reached a kind of underground harbor, where they clambered out onto rocks and pebbles. Then they clambered up a passageway in the rock after Hagrid's lamp, coming out at last onto smooth, damp grass right in the shadow of the castle. They walked up a flight of stone steps and crowded around the huge oak front door. Everyone here? Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door. Quinn's heart slammed against his chest as he waited for the door to open. Chapter 19, Sorting Ceremony, the Hat, and Dormitory. The door swung open at once. A tall, black-haired lady in dark maroon robes stood there. She had a very stern face which reminded Quinn of his grandfather when he was serious. And Quinn knew who this lady was. The first years are here, Professor McGonagall, said Hagrid. The stern lady, now identified as Professor Minerva McGonagall, Hogwarts Transmigration teacher, nodded and spoke, "Thank you, Hagrid. I will take them from here." She pulled the door wide to the entrance hall, which was absolutely enormous. The stone walls were lit with flaming torches like the ones at Gringotts, the ceiling was too high to make out, and a magnificent marble staircase facing them led to the upper floors. The gaggle of first years followed behind Professor McGonagall across the flagged stone floor. They reached a doorway, and Quinn could hear the drone of hundreds of voices. That must be the Great Hall, thought Quinn as Professor McGonagall led them into a small, empty chamber off the hall. Quinn felt a little uncomfortable as the first years huddled together with each other a little too close than he was comfortable with. All of them were peering about nervously. "Welcome to Hogwarts," said McGonagall as she spoke to the nervous first years. "The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a crucial ceremony because, while you are here, your house will be something like your family within Hogwarts. You will have classes with the rest of your house, sleep in your house dormitory, and spend your free time in your house common room." She stood a little straighter, and with a hint on her face, she continued, "The 4 houses are called Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each house has its own noble history, and each has produced outstanding witches and wizards. While you are at Hogwarts, your triumphs will earn your house points, while any rule breaking will lose house points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points is awarded the House Cup, a great honor. I hope each of you will be a credit to whichever house becomes yours." Quinn resisted the urge to snort in McGonagall's face. The house point system was a ruse implemented by the school administration to keep the students in check through peer pressure. No student who cared about their social life wouldn't want to lose points and face the wrath of their fellow students, and even those who didn't care about what others thought trod lightly in fear of being bullied. All in all, it was a fantastic system that kept in check most people other than a few exceptions like the Weasley twins. Even Quinn wasn't an exception, as he didn't want to stand in the limelight among his peers. The life of popularity wasn't Quinn's cup of tea. He just wanted to learn magic in peace. And the popularity would hinder his ability to move around the castle, though the twins had no difficulty moving around, so maybe there was a workaround. Well, they do have the Marauder's map, thought Quinn as he paid attention to what McGonagall was saying. The sorting ceremony will take place in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school. I suggest you all smarten yourselves up as much as you can while you are waiting. Her eyes lingered on a few people's clothes, silently telling them to smarten themselves up. I shall return when we are ready for you. Please wait quietly, finished Professor McGonagall before leaving the chamber. Quinn looked at his clothes, and with a slight use of magic, his clothes straightened up. He then turned to Katie and Cho. Hey, how do I look? Both the girls looked over Quinn. He had jet black hair and stone grey eyes. He styled his hair in a simple yet neat Ivy League hairstyle. He had been taught to take good care of his body, so nothing felt out of place. He was tall for his age, and because of years of posture training, his body language exuded confidence. His clothes, even though a simple school uniform, looked good on him. Finally, Quinn was comfortable with his own skin, and that added another layer of charm. Both girls nodded and gave him thumbs up, and in return, Quinn complimented them. You two also look good. So, please don't be nervous. Everything will be fine, and every house would be happy to have guys. I am sure that you would get into the house you want. Quinn complimented the girls and said words of comfort to calm them down. He could see that most of the first year were nervous being sorted in front of the whole school, and some didn't even know the sorting process. Quinn's words did work to some extent as he saw both of them calm down a little, but there was still a little nervousness left, which was natural knowing that they would be walking inside the hall while the entire school would be looking at them. Then came the parade of ghosts, followed by screams from several students who had never seen a ghost. Quinn found ghosts interesting as they were conclusive evidence of the existence of the soul. A ghost was the imprint of the soul of a once-living wizard or witch. And as such, they were a type of spirit who are either afraid of death or have some powerful connection to the locations they haunt. McGonagall returned to the chamber and shooed away the ghosts. Move along now. The sorting ceremony's about to start. She turned to the students and commanded, now, form a line and follow me. With McGonagall in the lead, the new students exited the chamber, went back across the hall, and through a pair of double doors into the Great Hall. Quinn had read the books and had imagined what the Great Hall would look like, and he had seen the movies, but nothing matched the sight in front of him. The hall was lit by thousands and thousands of candles that floated in midair over 4 long tables. On the tables sat the entire school's student body. These tables were laid with glittering golden plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers were sitting. McGonagall led the first years up here and came to a halt in a line facing the other students, with the teachers behind them. The hundreds of faces staring at them looked like pale lanterns in the flickering candlelight. Among the students, ghosts could be seen in their ghostly silver glow. Quinn looked up at the ceiling and saw a glossy black ceiling dotted with stars. He could imagine Hermione Granger reciting the lines from the books, "The ceiling is bewitched to look like the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history." Removing his eyes from the mesmerizing ceiling, and looked ahead. He saw McGonagall silently placing a 4-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool, she put a raggedy pointed wizard's hat. Quinn waited, and then it happened. A mouth-like crack opened up in the hat, and it began singing. I may be old and frayed, but don't let that betray you. Stitched and bewitched. Over 1,000 years ago. The 4 greatest witches and wizards of the time. United by one single desire. The wish to inspire and help young minds. So, a place of education was the creation. The founders 4. Helga Hufflepuff of Valley Broad. Rowena Ravenclaw from the Glen. Godric Gryffindor of Wild Moor. Salazar Slytherin from the Fen. From these noble names, For houses were born. Gryffindor, which houses the bold and brave. Ravenclaw selected those filled with cleverness. Hufflepuff welcomed the loyal who love to toil. Slytherin chooses only those who are pure. Their differences are what defined them. Together they stood, never to be divided. But what brought them together soon sought to tear them apart. Battles were fought over Hogwarts. Soon the time had come for one to depart. So 4 became 3. Which house will it be? Put me on, and I will see. The entire hall burst into applause as the hat finished its song. It bowed to each of the 4 tables and then became quite still again. Murmurs went spreading through the first-year students like wildfire. Many were relieved to hear that they only had to put the hat on their head. Professor McGonagall now stepped forward, holding a long roll of parchment. When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted. Then started the sorting ceremony of the students. Quinn heard a few recognizable names, and their houses were the same as canon. Marcus Belby, Eddie Carmichael, Cho Chang, Marietta Edgecombe went to Ravenclaw, while Katie Bell and Cormac McLagan went to Gryffindor. Finally came Quinn's turn. He was the last person to be sorted because Quinn's last name was West, and W was the last letter in this year's list, with no surnames from letters X, Y, and Z. McGonagall looked at Quinn and announced, "West, Quinn." Students who had gotten bored because of the long process once again focused on the ceremony, knowing Quinn was the last student. Quinn climbed the shallow ladders and nodded to McGonagall before sitting down on the stool. The last thing Quinn saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was most of the students looking at him, and the moment the hat covered his eyes, Quinn closed his eyes and pulled up his occlumency shields to the limit. Said a little voice in his ear, "It has been quite a while since I had countered this level of resistance from occlumency shields, and that was when one of the previous headmasters had put me on his head. But never I have seen this level of occlumency shields from a child of your age." Quinn fought the urge to smile. He felt he had beat the infamous hat from entering his mind. But the next moment, the hat shattered his misunderstanding as now he heard the hat's voice inside his head. "But, you see, when the founders created me, they truly went overboard, so Mr. West, your level of occlumency shields aren't enough." Quinn gritted his teeth as someone had once again entered his mind, and he couldn't do anything about it. He could remove the hat and rip it to threads with magic, but that would be the last thing Quinn wanted to do, so he just sat tight. "Oh my, aren't you a little devil, Mr. West? So much talent for magic. I haven't seen anything like this, and I have been around for 1,000 years. You don't use a wand and yet have this level of magical abilities. There was one who I can think of, but even he wasn't as ridiculous as you. Seeing the wand in your luggage shows that you are taking a different approach from him and everyone else." Quinn helplessly controlled his emotions as the hat went through his memories. "Now, let's see where to put you. You are ready to showcase plenty of courage when it comes to the pursuit of magic. You have already shown hard work and tolerance by learning magic the way you have. The immense thirst for knowledge is evident from your personal library. Finally, you have some grand ambitions, dear child. The greatest wizard of all times." Quinn was getting impatient, so he just came out and said, "Put me in Ravenclaw so that we can end this. I am extremely uncomfortable with you on my head. Your mere presence in my mind displeases me like never before." The hat laughed in his head and spoke, "If that is what you wish for. Don't worry, Mr. West. Your secrets will remain safe with me. No one will ever know what I saw in your mind. Not even my creators, the founders, would know if they appeared in front of me." The next moment the hat shouted to the entire hall, "Ravenclaw." It took every single drop of Quinn's self-control to normally remove the hat from his head and not rip it from his head. He took a deep breath before moving to the Ravenclaw table and smiled when he reached the table that was clapping for him and congratulating him for being a hat stall as the hat took some time to make his decision. He sat down and turned to look at the high table while trying to calm down his turbulent emotions. He didn't like when his mind was invaded like now. It reminded him of the time when he started his lessons with Alan and how helpless he felt when Alan would just walk into this mind without batting an eye. He could still do it, but Quinn had learned to trust Alan and had gotten used to his teacher breaking into his mind, but the hat brought out emotions of the time when he didn't trust Alan. On the plus side, Quinn's secrets were safe with the hat. If he didn't tattle on Voldemort's messed up memories, he won't divulge my secrets, thought Quinn as he calmed himself down and slowly lifted the emotional aspect of occlumency to once again feel fully connected to his now calmed down emotions. Quinn looked around the Ravenclaw and thought about his decision to join Ravenclaw. Even if Quinn said that he was okay with going to any of the 4 houses, Quinn preferred if he didn't get sorted to Gryffindor or Hufflepuff. In Gryffindor, he would be in the eye of trouble in the future. With Hufflepuff, Quinn didn't think he would have much privacy because of the house's teamwork attribute. The remaining 2 options were Slytherin and Ravenclaw. Quinn had thought hard about where he wanted to end up, and Ravenclaw was his final decision. Slytherin would have been alright, but Quinn was afraid that he would instantly gain a negative reputation among the other 3 houses. And, if someone got suspicious of what he was doing, they would immediately categorize it as dark, and it took little to blow things out of proportion. Even inside the Slytherin, blood purists were always in power, and in the future, Voldemort would start recruiting mini Death Eaters from there, and Quinn didn't want to face the harassment known as recruitment. So, Quinn came to a logical conclusion to join the House of Bookworms, who had their heads into books and where he could operate in peace with no politics, disturbances, negative reputation, and needless nosy people. He just needed to blend in as your average Ravenclaw, which was too easy for Quinn. A loud clinking of cutlery broke Quinn from his thoughts and looked at the head table where he saw Albus Dumbledore had gotten to his feet. He was beaming at the students, his arms opened wide as if nothing could have pleased him more than to see them all there. "Welcome," he started. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words. And here they are: nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak. Thank you." Quinn wondered if the strange words in Dumbledore's speech were Hogwarts house elves' names, as the moment he said those words, food appeared across the tables. Various dishes like roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops and lamb chops, sausages, bacon and steak, boiled potatoes, roast potatoes, fries, Yorkshire pudding, peas, carrots, gravy, ketchup, and peppermint humbugs were cooked for all to indulge. Quinn's grooming triggered, and he began eating with impeccable table manners. Gone were the days when Quinn used to feel stiffed while eating with strict table manners. Now, he felt right at home when eating like this. Quinn a little of everything and then took part in idle banter with his new housemates. A well-fed Quinn looked around, and his eyes fell upon the high table. Hagrid was drinking deeply from his goblet. McGonagall was talking to Dumbledore. He immediately recognized Snape dressed in all black, and Quinn felt Snape was lucky to look like his movie actor rather than his book description. He moved his eyes to another teacher and saw Quirinus Quirrell without a turban and was currently wearing a wizard's hat. If I remember correctly, he is currently a Muggle Studies professor. Poor guy would give in to Voldemort and agree to house Voldemort's soul in his body, thought Quinn. He saw Quirrell happily chatting with a squat little woman who wore a patched hat over her flyaway hair, who Quinn could identify as Pomona Sprout, the herbology professor. Quinn figured out the names of the other professors with the help of a senior. When the desserts disappeared from the tables, Dumbledore stood up from his chair and asked for the students' attention in the hall. He cleared his throat before speaking. "I have a few start-of-term notices to give you. First years should note that the forest on the grounds is forbidden to all pupils. And a few of our older students would do well to remember that as well. Mr. Filch, the caretaker, also asks me to remind you all that no magic should be used between classes in the corridors." He pointed at Rolanda Hooch and continued, "Quidditch trials will be held in the second week of the term. Anyone interested in playing for their house teams should contact Madam Hooch." The dinner ended with Dumbledore urging students to stand up for the school song. After which, Quinn followed behind the Ravenclaw prefect with the other first years to the Ravenclaw Tower. Quinn made sure to memorize the path they took, as he would need it from tomorrow onwards. The entrance to the Ravenclaw common room was on the west side of Hogwarts. At the top of a spiral staircase was a door without a doorknob or keyhole. But there was a bronze knocker in the shape of an eagle that asked a riddle for gaining entry to the common room. If they answer incorrectly, they must wait for someone else who gets it right. The prefect explained the system to the first years and then led them inside. The common was a circular room with arch windows hung with blue and bronze silks and a midnight blue carpet covered in stars, which reflected onto the domed ceiling. The room was furnished with tables, chairs, and bookcases, and by the door leading up to the dormitory stood a tall statue of Rowena Ravenclaw made of white marble. Before the prefect sent them off to their dorms, he told them the roles to be followed while in the common room and the dormitories. He closed with, "You will find your luggage in your rooms, and please make sure to store the clothes that you want to be cleaned in the cupboards provided to you because any clothes in your trunk or luggage won't be taken for cleaning." 3 people rather than the 5-person arrangement in the Gryffindor shared a room in the Ravenclaw dormitories. Quinn found his luggage on his assigned bed. He looked at his 2 roommates, who looked quite nervous, so he broke the ice. "Hey, my name is Quinn West." "What about you guys?" he asked with a smile on his face. The other 2 looked at each other before one of them spoke. "Hi, I am Eddie Carmichael." Then both of them looked at the 3rd boy in the room, who stuttered through his introduction. "And my name is Marcus Belby." Quinn nodded and spoke. "Excellent, Carmichael and Belby. We would be sharing this dorm for the rest of the year, so if you guys have any problems, don't hesitate to ask. Now, I am sure all of us are quite tired, and I would very much like to sleep, so let's continue in the morning, all right?" Quinn directed the conversation, and the other 2 could only nod along. Quinn made himself on his new bed and closed his eye, and his last thought before falling asleep was about tomorrow. Chapter 20, Ravenclaw, First Impressions, and the Problem. The 2nd of September 1990 was a Sunday, which meant that there were no classes, and the first years were free to roam the castle. Quinn got up the next day, and in the morning, and after completing his morning routine, he took off to explore the castle but not before visiting the Great Hall for breakfast. Hogwarts Castle was a large, 7-story lofty building supported by magic. It had 142 staircases throughout its many towers and turrets and deep dungeons. The castle was built in the late early Middle Ages, c. 993, by a wizard architect and the 4 most celebrated wizards of the age, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin. Quinn started from the Great Hall and then explored the castle for the entire day but could only cover the ground and the 1st floor. The castle was so large that Quinn wasn't able to move past the 1st floor. And Quinn was planning to memorize the entire castle. Quinn would live here for the next 7 years, and because of that, he wanted to use the castle and the accompanying property as his new mindscape. He knew the transition from the West Manor to the Hogwarts Castle would be gradual and a lengthy process. But Quinn was confident that he would be able to explore enough of the castle in a year or 2 to build a working model in his mind. And who knew what level of detail could he accomplish in 7 years? Quinn returned to his dorm just before dinner time and freshened up by taking a shower. When he exited the shower, Quinn saw Eddie Carmichael in the room. "Hey, Carmichael. Do you want to go to Great Hall together?" asked Quinn as he exited the bathroom. Eddie looked relieved at the offer and spoke. "Yeah, I forgot the way to the Great Hall. It would be great if we could go together." Quinn chuckled and offered, "Don't worry, I will go with you till you get comfortable. Hogwarts is a confusing place." As the 2 climbed down the dormitory stairs, Eddie asked, "Where have you been the entire day? I don't think I saw you in the dorms today." "Yeah, I didn't return to the dorm all day. I was exploring the castle. There were a lot of things to cover, and I lost track of time," replied Quinn as he guided Eddie from the Ravenclaw Tower to the Great Hall. "What about you? What did you do today?" Eddie shrugged and said, "Played a lot of gobstones, went to the Quidditch field to see some of the older students flying on brooms, and talked to some of the older students about Hogwarts." "Really? Tell me about it." When they reached the Great Hall, a lot of students were already seated. Quinn and Eddie found Marcus Belby sitting at the Ravenclaw table, already eating. Both the guys stopped just before reaching him. You see, when it came to food, Marcus Belby could be compared to Ron Weasley. They both saw Marcus shoving food down his gullet without care. Eddie looked at Quinn, his eyes asking what to do, almost begging him not to sit next to their roommate. Quinn was of a similar mind, so neither wanted to sit next to Marcus while he ate. "Let's just sit opposite to him. This way, he won't feel bad, and there would be plenty of distance between us," offered Quinn. Eddie nodded, and both of them turned back to go around the table and sat opposite Marcus. "Hey, Belby, how have you been today? You seem to be enjoying the food," greeted Quinn and opened up the conversation, and the last sentence caused Eddie to stifle a laugh. Marcus looked up and spoke with food still in his mouth, FW Whisgrata. Quinn didn't understand a word that came out of Marcus' mouth, but he still spoke as he put food on his plate. Oh yeah? That is great. It surprised Quinn that the sight of Marcus didn't erase his appetite, but Quinn was too hungry. Eddie continued the conversation at the table. Professor Flitwick would be coming to the common room today. He will be giving us the timetable and talk with us before we start school tomorrow. That is great. I heard Professor Flitwick is Britain's most knowledgeable charms master. Plus, before he started teaching, he was dueling champion with the title of Master Duelist. He has been at Hogwarts for around 20 years or so, supplied Quinn as they talked about the upcoming event. After some more idle chatting, Quinn became silent and concentrated on eating. With today's exploration and Quinn's usual habit of emptying his magical core every day, he needed a significant amount of calories to meet his dietary needs, so he was quite hungry and needed food in his body. Scene break. After dinner, all the first-year Ravenclaws gathered around the common room to meet Flitwick. On the decided time, Phileas Flitwick entered the Ravenclaw common room and greeted the gathered people in his squeaky voice. Good evening, children. I hope I didn't keep you waiting. Phileas Flitwick, half goblin and half human, had a short stature because of goblin lineage. He tottered to an empty chair and sat on it before asking the students to gather around him. Quinn sat on a chair that was a little distance away from the diminutive professor, but at a distance where Quinn could clearly listen to him. Many students opted to sit on the floor to be close to the head of the house. They were already acting like little Ravenclaws, not willing to miss out on anything that a teacher said. I hope all of you have settled down in your dorms and have no problems with your living arrangements, because if you do, please do come to me. It is my duty to fix any problems you have, so don't hesitate to share any of your problems, said Flitwick to the new students, trying to get them comfortable. Now first, let me introduce myself. My name is Phileas Flitwick. I teach the subject charms. This means I will be teaching you the wonders of all kinds of charms. Flitwick showed a toothy grin seeing the bright-eyed children when he mentioned charms, but to you children, I am also your head of the house. You will be under my wings during the time you are at Hogwarts, so once again I say that please don't hesitate and come to me with any problem. He took a pause before speaking. My doors are always open to a Ravenclaw in need. Then he took out his wand and gave it a swing for the Ravenclaw house symbol to appear in the air. The students oohed in awe at the sight of the magic. Even Quinn was mildly surprised. A light-based magic to project an image in the air, reflected Quinn as he looked at the glowing house symbol. Quinn wasn't surprised because he hadn't seen anything like this before. The concept behind the magic was simple enough and was a magic from the same line as the Lumos spell, but a lot more complex than the wand lighting charm. The reason behind Quinn's surprise was the detail in the projection image. I can see the individual feathers in the raven, and the image is three-dimensional with color grading and shadows, thought Quinn as he admired the show of magic. Quinn could also project an image in the air, but it would lack the detail present in Flitwick's work. Flitwick giggled as he took in the joy of his new charges and said, "You all were sorted in Ravenclaw, so I think it is appropriate for you to know about the origins of the house." With a swish of his wand, the Ravenclaw symbol changed into a woman wearing medieval clothing. Quinn looked past everyone and saw that the white marble statue of Rowena Ravenclaw. He could see the resemblance between the two. Flitwick presented a question to the students: "Does anyone of you recognize this lady?" And every single one of the students, including Quinn, raised their hands. Flitwick pointed at Quinn and asked him to answer. "Please tell us all your name before answering the question." Quinn stood up from his chair and answered, "Quinn West." The lady is one of the 4 founders, Rowena Ravenclaw. She, along with the other 3 founders, established Hogwarts. Flitwick enthusiastically clapped while bouncing on his chair and said, 3 points to Ravenclaw. As Mr. West said, Rowena Ravenclaw was one of the 4 founders, and she created the Hogwarts House of Ravenclaw. Ravenclaws such as yourselves are characterized by their wit, learning, wisdom, acceptance, intelligence, and creativity. Lady Rowena sought all these qualities in her students, so Ravenclaw students display a number of these traits. I myself was a Ravenclaw during my time at Hogwarts as a student. Rowena Ravenclaw prized learning above all else, and so do we. Unlike the other houses, which all have concealed entrances to their common rooms, we don't have that. Ours has no handle but an enchanted bronze knocker in the shape of an eagle. When you rap on the door, this knocker will ask you a question, and if you can answer it correctly, you are allowed in. This simple barrier has kept out everyone but Ravenclaws for nearly 1,000 years. The last sentence did cause some first-years to worry, but Flitwick assured them, I can see some of you who are scared by having to answer the eagle's questions, but don't worry. Ravenclaws learn quickly, and you will soon enjoy the challenges the door sets. It is not unusual to find 20 people standing outside the common room door, all trying to work out the answer to the day's question together. This is a great way to meet fellow Ravenclaws from other years and learn from them, although it is a bit annoying if you have forgotten your Quidditch robes or books and need to get in and out in a hurry. In fact, I would advise you to triple-check your bag for everything you need before leaving Ravenclaw Tower. Flitwick was laughing hysterically by the end. He truly was as eccentric as people made him out to be. Flitwick disappeared the projection and continued, sometimes our pursuit of knowledge may come of a being as bookish, and my peers at my time at Hogwarts as a student called me a bookworm among other things. When Flitwick said this, many students showed sad faces as a lot of them had been called similar words. Flitwick smiled gently and spoke a little louder, but don't let any of those words deter you. They are just jealous of our knowledge and wisdom and say mean things because we have things they don't have. So, be proud of being smart, and don't feel embarrassed by your love of knowledge. Wear it like a badge of honor. Know that if Rowena Ravenclaw was alive, she would have chosen you all from all the students. Be proud because you are the smartest of the bunch. He stood upon his chair and exclaimed, always remember this, wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure. Repeat after me, wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure. Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure. Every student in the common room repeated after Flitwick, and the collective voices of the students sound like a war chant. Even Quinn chanted the infamous quote with his fellow students and could feel the confidence that Flitwick given many students. It made Quinn think that Flitwick could have a great career as a motivational speaker. After everybody calmed down, and Flitwick was sitting on his chair rather than standing on it, he took out a matchstick-sized stack of parchments and waved his wand above the stack, and the stack enlarged to a standard stack of parchments. With another wave, a sheet each flew to every student in the room. Quinn gracefully received the sheet and read it. On the parchment was a timetable. These are your timetable for the year. You will all follow this schedule every week till the end of the year. Please note and remember the room numbers as they won't change, and I would recommend that you reach your class 5 minutes before time, said Flitwick as Quinn read the timetable, and he was surprised to see that in a day he only had to attend 2 to 3 hours of classes. Quinn calculated, and the time allotted to classroom studies was only 14 hours a week, 15 if you added the weekly flying lesson with Madam Hooch. Quinn was totally down with this schedule, as it would give him more time to study magic on his own. He was sure that the workload would increase from the 3rd year onwards, but he would worry about that when the time came. Quinn looked up when he heard Flitwick clap his hand and asking the students to look at him. If you would turn your sights to the library in the common room. Quinn and the rest looked at the library present inside the Ravenclaw common room, a feature unique to the Ravenclaw common room. The library has many books that would help you increase your knowledge. I am in charge of selecting the books on the shelves of the library. I constantly keep note of the progress of every class that is taught in Hogwarts. So I know what is being taught to every student of the school. Because of that I place complementary and supplementary material related to the topics currently being taught in your classes in our library. For example, if first-year students are learning how to brew the sleeping draught in potions class, then I would place books related to the draught and its ingredients in our library for students to read. Then there are my weekly and monthly recommendations, which are not related to the course material but are always an interesting read. There is also a rule that the books often change on the shelves of our library, to keep those who want to learn on their feet, so even if you can't read them, please note the titles, as you would be able to find all these books in the Hogwarts library. Of all the things Flitwick had said today, this interested Quinn the most. Supplementary material and additional reading were always in better understanding things. Quinn made a note to take full advantage of the in-house library. At the end of the talk, Flitwick asked, now, other than Mr. West, who gained Ravenclaw their first points of the year, congratulations to you, Mr. West, all the first years, please introduce yourselves. I want to match the names to the faces, and it would also help your housemates to know your names. Quinn looked at Eddie and said, "Yeah, Tilda." Then Quinn paid attention to his year mates introducing themselves. Quinn too wanted to match faces to names. It would not be well if he could not recall his housemates' names. Before sleeping that night, Quinn wrote a letter to his family. He described his first day at Hogwarts, his sorting ceremony, what he found in the castle, his living arrangements, among other things. Sealed the letter in an envelope and put it into his dorm's desk drawer, ready to be mailed tomorrow via a school owl. Scene break. During Quinn's first week at Hogwarts, he attended all the lessons and performed all the tasks taught to him. They were easy for him, and like the typical Ravenclaw, he was among the first ones to complete the practicals. Actually, he was the first every time, but he just didn't raise his hand to show that he was done with a task. Unlike Hermione Granger, he didn't jump to every answer that the professors asked. He only answered the questions that were too easy or when nobody had the answer to the question. It did cause some teachers to call out Quinn to answer questions which didn't bother him, as Quinn knew all the answers, and because he didn't jump to answer all the questions, he wasn't tagged as a know-it-all. Because Quinn already knew all the stuff in the classes, he would efficiently make use of his time by sneakily completing all his homework in class time itself, so he had more time to himself. He even completed his potions homework in Snape's class itself, which Quinn thought deserved at least 50 points. But Snape did pay attention to Quinn because his potions were way better than the rest of the class, and by a huge margin. When Quinn told Snape that he had learned about potions at home, he just sneered but said nothing, as this practice wasn't uncommon for magical households. But Quinn didn't know that Snape was now paying extra attention to him. Even though learning potions before coming to school wasn't uncommon, the quality of potions that Quinn brewed was not common at all, especially for someone his age. Even the other professors remembered Quinn fairly well, and he was among the students that stood out from his batch. Quinn's practical work was just too good for a student who had been in school for a single week. But because Quinn did nothing extra other than what was asked, he was just seen as a very talented child and not the freak of nature that Quinn was. Plus, being a Ravenclaw helped Quinn's image, as Ravenclaws were always good at academics. Quinn had no idea what was going through his professors' minds because he was too busy with another problem. A major problem. Quinn's current capabilities were on the level of a fourth-year student. His level of ability to focus magic was stuck at his current level for a half-year and had improved little. So, he had begun working at more efficiency and speed of casting, hoping that it would help, but nothing particularly helped. He did everything to improve what he already knew and could do with his level of focus, but his focus didn't improve by much. This was the reason that Quinn was excited about turning 11 and getting a wand. But both of those events caused him disappointment. The reason why a child started attending a magical school at age 11 was that the magic inside a child switched from a turbulent state to a state of growth. A person with magic entered a time of exponential growth from age 11 that continued to age 17, and a magical's ability to focus magic would increase naturally. The ability to focus magic would increase even if they didn't use magic, and if they worked hard during this time, they would reap added benefits. The term magic is muscle, applied heavily from ages 11 to 17, as a person saw the most growth in this time period, and that applied to the ability to focus magic. But nothing happened when Quinn turned 11, there was no jump in focus for him. Time passed, but nothing changed in his magic. Then he looked forward to getting a wand. He wanted a wand to aid him by supplementing his focus, but it turned out that if he used a wand, he would become dependent on it, and it would take an exponential amount of work to perform focusless magic. Now, his wand was encased in a block of wood and locked inside a room in a suitcase. But Quinn was forgetting an important event. A date that came every year, and after so many years Quinn had forgotten about it, but this year it was going to be different. Quinn didn't know it, but this day would be a turning point in his life. This marks the end of part 5 of the story Harry Potter, A Magical Journey. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.